Good morning, Brattleboro. Welcome back to Speaking Truth to Power, a show here on BCTV, Brattleboro Community Television, a great service here in Brattleboro. Community television's here in the state of Vermont. So BCTV, and here we are back on Speaking Truth to Power, episode 3. Well, we started the last show to determine whether or not the incision, or I should say the excision from my lymph nodes was found to be cancer. Well, if you've been waiting for an answer, the answer is yes. But I don't call it cancer. I call it follicular lymphoma. Follicular lymphoma, what is that? Well, from what I understand, it is a type of lymphoma. What is lymphoma? It is a cancer of the lymph system. What is the lymph system? It is one of the ways the body cleans itself out. What is lymphoma? It is a cancer developing in the lymph system that creates sizable masses, 3.5 centimeters versus smaller than 1 centimeter, or I think this was 3.5 centimeters and it should have been smaller, or this was 3.5 centimeters and it should have been less than 1. Anyway, when they removed this went down, even though it's still there. They did a bone marrow. You know, if they ever say they want to take bone marrow, tell them to take their own. It hurts. Oh, it doesn't hurt at all. I'd volunteer to do it if they needed me to do it again. The after business was painful, but nothing. I'm a lucky man. So follicular lymphoma, stage 3. All cancers are staged. Stage 1 means I have it. Stage 2 means it's on 2 sides of my body. Stage 3 means it is above and below my diaphragm. Stage 4 would mean if it was worse. If it was worse, it would be in my bone marrow, which is why they took a piece of my bone marrow. So yes, you're now speaking to someone who is a follicular lymphoma survivor and have not yet been treated. There is no treatment until the symptoms get much worse. Feels to me like dodging a bullet, being given a new lease on life. I tend to live with a great deal of gratitude. The gratitude with which I live has just increased. I'm a lucky man. So I'm back, and I'm back with the guests here. My guests from Entery who join me on the show. We have Mr. Joel Inch. Along with Mr. Marty Cohn, Entergy's spokespeople. Mr. Lynch is a newer Mr. Inch is a newer spokesperson. Gentlemen, in the past month, Entergy has announced not just the shutdown and the upcoming closure of the Pilgrim nuclear reactor, which we talked about here in episode 2, but also in the past month, Entergy has announced another change. They're going to shut down the Fitzpatrick reactor by the spring of 2017, and they're going to push back shutting down the Pilgrim reactor until 2019. When I look, do you spokespeople have anything to say about that? Mr. Cohn is speechless. Mr. Inch has nothing to say. Okay, it's not that I didn't ask. Okay, so that's 2 reactors shutting down after us. If we're number 99, that makes us down to number 97. Exelon hasn't announced. They'll be announcing towards the end of the year, which should be next month. There are more reactors to close than Entergy's, believe you me. In the last episode, I realized I made an error by stating that the Fitzpatrick reactor is in Oswego, New York. It is near Oswego, actually, in Scriba, New York. When I said that there had been no new reactors sited in this country, that's not exactly true. There are 4 reactors that have been sited, 2 at Sheeran Harris in Carolina, as well as 2 in Georgia at the Vogtle nuclear site. They are both experiencing significant delays and are billions of dollars over budget. That's the way it is when you set out to build a new nuclear reactor today. I don't know if I've mentioned the 2005 Energy Policy Act that provides a 78% startup cost to the first 6,000 megawatts of new nuclear energy in this country. Now, it hasn't happened yet. We're 10 years down the road. That's what those new reactors are fighting for. They want to be producing power. They want to be producing power so that they can get that startup general capital from the federal government. I'm not sure how the federal government came up with that kind of money in 2005. Also, the Watts Bar nuclear reactor, which is it's in Tennessee. Started in the early 80s, and they just completed it. They had been scavenging that reactor for parts for the other reactors there, but apparently they've put all the parts there that make the reactor work, and they're soon to start it up. So to clarify, Watts Bar 2, it wasn't in the 80s, it was in 1973 when it was awarded by the 10 CFR 50, the federal regulation by the NRC. It was given permission to break ground. They actually broke ground in 1972. Here we are 43 years later and billions of dollars over budget. Watts Bar 2 has just been given this past week permission to operate. Last night, my beautiful bride and myself went to a meeting of the Department of Public Service Public Advocacy Division, where the Department of Public Service is looking to rework what it does as a public advocate. Granted, there wasn't a great deal of advertisement about this event. We went because for me to, I don't know how to make it more specific to the public advocacy aspect of the Department of Public Service, but the Department of Public Service, from my perspective, after years and years of sitting at Public Service Board hearings, the Department of Public Service, while it is mandated to be the ratepayer advocate, serves as the governor's right-hand team in ratepayer cases. And what I spoke about was MOU, Memoranda of Understanding, which every time Entery has been in front of the Public Service Board, every case has been resolved, regardless of how many thousands of dollars it costs to show up at those board hearings, $90,000 a pop, basically. For those interveners that invest the $90,000 to then have the Department of Public Service go behind closed doors with the utility or the whatever they're called, exempt wholesale merchant generator, feels insulting. It just feels wrong, and it certainly doesn't honor the public. Anyway, so I went and I shared that. Who knows? I mean, what was clear to me about that event that the Department of Public Service did last night, they had a new attorney who was there, and the staff person who was with the new attorney, he too might have been an attorney. One guy was new, the other guy had been there 3 months. Now, I guess they don't want to send the guys who matter. I mean, really, what does it matter to have people come and share their impressions of how the public advocacy of the Department of Public Service functions? I have the Public Service Board, I did mention last night, is currently composed of one man who was the lead attorney for the department under Jim Douglas. And his name is Jim Volz, and he's now the chairperson of the Public Service Board. The other person who's on the board used to be an attorney with the department, Ms. Hoffman. She's on the board. And the third person we know who has a great deal of regulatory knowledge is the wife of our state federal representative, Peter Welch. Wish I could get a job like that, maybe. So to me, there's an issue. Having two people who've been serving on the side of looking for the cheapest rates makes a big deal. Having them as the deciders doesn't make sense, it's not a positively working system. So I think Entergy's somewhat shooting from the hip. They came out and said they're going to close Pilgrim 2017, then they came out and said they're going to close Fitzpatrick in 2017, which apparently they're going to do. And they're going to try to push Pilgrim back and see if it'll last for another couple of years. Who knows? I can't. I mean, I know it comes down to where where each reactor has PPAs, power purchase agreements with the state, or with anyone who's willing to buy their power. So it goes. Welcome back. Good morning, Brattleboro, speaking truth to power. Yes, once again, it's Gary Sachs here in Brattleboro. This is the No Nukes is Good Nukes episode. And we're here today with our couple of Entergy spokespeople. We've got Joel Inch here, Marty Cohn, of course, Entergy's prime decommissioning spokesperson, and they've now chosen to give Joel spokesperson status. Boy, they're great that way, that Entergy Corporation, the way they throw labels on people. Government affairs liaison, government liaison of affairs, spokesperson, in charge of refuse during decommissioning, government refuse during decommissioning, secretary in charge of refuse during government decommissioning. They put labels on people left, right, and I'm not sure the job has anything besides a title, but it sure does sound good, doesn't it? Gotta love the corporate way of life here in Vermont. Thank you, Entergy. We look forward to your leaving. What we're going to talk about today is No Nukes is Good Nukes. They're fallen. Yes, in the past month, Entergy has stated, first they said Entergy Pilgrim, the Plymouth reactor, will close by 2017. Then 2 weeks later, they come out and say Entergy Fitzpatrick reactor will close by 2017. Maybe they're not sure, but they're trying to work on closing these reactors, numerous reactors, because they have to come up with money to decommission these reactors. Now, both those two reactors, Fitzpatrick in New York, as well as Pilgrim in Massachusetts, have significantly more in their decommissioning trust funds than we have here. Our decommissioning trust fund is missing $70 million because Entergy's been allowed 11 months to tamper with it. And, 11 months to tamper with it. Oh wait, did I say that? 11 months to remove whatever they choose from the decommissioning trust fund. The decommissioning trust fund, I will remind viewers, was 0.05% of yours and mine and everyone's electric bill who's tied into the grid, who was a customer of CVPS or GMP between the years of 1982 and 2002. So those years of paying for your electricity are what created the $300 million decommissioning trust fund that Entergy took control of when they bought the reactor July 31st, 2002. Now, they couldn't touch it until they shut down the reactor. Having shut down the reactor December 29th, 2014, after lawsuits, after lawsuits, after lawsuits, after lawsuits, and after being contested in front of the state regulatory board, which apparently has no cojones. But anyway, the Public Service Board was manipulated by Entergy after the shutdown agreement, which became first it was the Memorandum of Understanding I don't remember how it actually came about. It was December 23rd, the negotiated settlement with Entergy, that Entergy said, look, if you don't take our settlement, we're leaving. So there goes our cheap cleanup with a reactor. Cheap, 1.2 billion? I mean, did anybody do any checks to verify if it's really 1.2 billion? Or then you talk about the 145 million away from 1.2 billion, and you're talking about numbers I can't do in my head. But, so we need 898 million, and we've got a little bit less than 600. And Entergy saying they can't decommission this reactor. Now, I believe it's the Pilgrim Decommissioning Trust Fund is up around 800 now. And the Fitzpatrick Decommissioning Trust Fund, I believe, is up around $800 million. I forget exactly. These trust funds were not created to cover taxes while the reactor is shut. If the corporate malfeasance that goes as democracy in this country, thanks to Citizens United and other wonderful laws, if the corporations have such an ability to use decommissioning funds to pay taxes and for other stupid non-decommissioning reasons, it's absurd. It doesn't make sense. I want to start my this is wrong category. It's wrong that nuclear power can do this. Corporations are considered individuals. Just plain wrong. Have I already introduced the individuals here? We have Joel Inch. We have Marty Cohn, both Entergy spokespeople. Very nice of you to be here. Do you have anything to say about these shutdowns, Entergy shutdowns, the Fitzpatrick shutdown announcement? Speak up, boys. Okay, the spokespeople have nothing to say. Clearly, I've invited them to the show, and they're speechless. What I can say back to you is I think you guys have no idea what they're doing. The guys down in New Orleans, they're playing cards. They're shuffling. They're trying to get a little bit of money from here to cover over there. Borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. Pretty sad, but let's see. We're hoping that 50 years from now, Entergy is going to decommission this reactor. Let's be real. Let's hope that 15 years from now, Entergy will choose to decommission this reactor. We don't need them to keep us dangling. We do need Entergy to take responsibility for the waste. Stop giving it to the federal government. Stop assuming that they'll be taking up your waste. You made it. Deal with it. I want to have a just plain wrong category. I mean, this show is we're allowed to figure out what's wrong, what's right. Leaving waste for future generations. Okay, feel free to call in with your guesses on that, but coming from me, I think that is wrong. Leaving radioactive waste that will last for 100,000 years for someone who's not alive today to have received the power from it feels kind of wrong. Captive regulators, an NRC that will do exactly what the industry wants it to, that too is wrong. Passing fracked gas from Canada, trying to get it through the United States, through Vermont, where we have said there will be no fracking. I consider that wrong too. Taking people's property, I consider that wrong. Eminent domain, I consider that wrong. And I'll take, so let's go back to follicular lymphoma. Last show, I know that we spent a great deal of time talking about cancer because I had just had my lymph node removed, excised, and the results came back 2 days later. I was here the day after the surgery, and the next morning, Friday the 16th, the surgeon called me to tell me that the diagnosis was follicular lymphoma. I asked repeated questions, and lymphoma, that's a form of cancer. My understanding is people can live 15, 20 years with it, so I'd like to aim for 20, 25. I'll work on changing my relationship with that issue, uninvited cells in my body, things like that. I get to live in gratitude now because I'm still alive and it's too small to treat. So yes, lymphoma is often from the environment. But like I said last show, the amazing thing about cancer is that it takes 10 years for it to show up in a body. Small amounts of it will show. I saw a PET scan of what my body showed. When the doctor says to you, I want to take some bone marrow, you know, I want to say don't let him, but it'll feel better after a week. There's a lot to be grateful for. I'm glad I can be here for the show today. I'm glad I can bring this information to you, clarifying what Entery has said on their Storm of Tears show, where basically they've been coming out with information. I don't have the notes on it today, but I have in the past, and I'll bring them back in for, of course, the fourth show. I came in today more to talk about I guess I want to say casual nonchalance of the Department of Public Service, the sending out some new guys to hear from the public. But we did get the transcript, so that'll be back up there. And I don't think the department even knew what it wanted to hear from individuals. That was the Department of Public Service asking for personal feedback on how people or organizations feel the Department of Public Service, Public Advocacy Department is doing in regard to the state of Vermont and the Public Service Board hearings. That's an event we went to last night. They're closing. The reactors are closing. The spokespeople have less and less to say. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Be good to friends. Be good to enemies. Be good to everyone. Bye now.